So welcome back. We're live in the GOAT District. Another press coverage. Today we've got Davis Mattek back for his second time in the district. How you doing today, Davis?
You know, I'm doing pretty good. We got waivers done last night. Not like the greatest waiver week of all time, but you know, we're getting into the rhythm of the season, which is pretty nice.
It's going to be a fun one tonight, and we're happy to have you on today.
GOAT District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
So yeah, it's you kind of get into like the normalcy of your life when it's the fantasy football season, the timing of everything. I know we talked a little bit about waivers. We'll dive back into it. If you're watching this podcast, you most likely already follow Davis on Twitter. You're watching him on the Sports Grid. You're listening to the podcast. Davis, what's your schedule like this on a weekly routine during the season in terms of when your shows are dropping and when people can find your material?
Sunday night we have the Gilcast on the Sports Grid channel. Then we have Tuesday, Thursday, Friday shows up there. The Tailgate is either Wednesday afternoons or Thursday afternoons, and then every day, Monday through Friday, 10 to 11 Central Time on Sports Grid.
Awesome. Yeah, Davis is definitely somebody you should be following. You know him a lot for his content, but if you play high stakes, you also might be bumping heads with Davis. He does a lot of FFPC and a lot of NFFC. How are your teams doing so far this season?
You know, pretty much a mixed bag. Don't have any 3-0s. Missed out by like a couple points here or there. A co-manager error on one team could have been 3-0. We decided we were starting Devin Smith over Bateman on a Lamar team, but then the save button was not clicked on Devin Smith's 36 points last week. Not that I'm mad about that or anything. I mean, I think it would be very hard to feel great about any team you drafted right now. Like, I guess if you drafted in the main event, if you did some running back at the end, or no, if you started Adams, Mark Andrews, two other wide receivers, grabbed Amon-Ra St. Brown and then grabbed Lamar with Mark Andrews, and like maybe you're feeling great. But I don't look at any of my teams like, okay, this one's the league winner. It's been too chaotic the first 3 weeks.
And it's such a grind. I think chaotic's the right word. One of the big hits for, not necessarily a smash, but one of the guys you felt pretty comfortable with based on how he looks on the football field at the running back position is Deandre Swift, and he goes down with an injury. You saw Justin Jefferson, get pretty much shut down last week. There's not a whole lot of safe streets right now. I think it'll kind of even itself out as it always does. But you're right. It's not a lot of 3-0 teams right now. And there's a lot of kind of paper tiger 2-1 teams you're going to find in a lot of these leagues that I think things could go south for them. So we're just kind of embracing the chaos and having as many good matchups and players as we feel we can in our lineups now. And I think that's the best we can do. In the pregame, we touched on waivers, and I'm doing a waiver wire show in the GOAT District, but one waiver wire show I always listen to is yours. I think you do a good job of presenting guys that are available to high stakes players. You're going deep in your approach to it.
Yeah. Grant Calcaterra got mentioned this week, so it's we get pretty deep into like the FFPC weeds.
Yeah, I mean it's terrific, and I also think you keep it nice and short, which is something I've been working on. I always say I'm going to go 15 minutes, and ends up turning into 30. So you do a great job with that. But you mentioned you didn't get too many guys on waivers. Who are some of the people that you bid on that maybe you missed out on?
So a couple of the guys, we didn't. I actually was just combing through. We didn't miss on any of our bids last night, which I think was pretty indicative of the week. The main thing being just not interested in bidding on Matt Collins. Like I knew Matt Collins was going to go for at least 75, probably more like 3. I mean, I saw our buddy Mojo posted max bids on Matt Collins at 334, but it's like, Khalil Herbert and Jamal Williams are owned in every league in high stakes leagues. So you're not really bidding on them. I mean, honestly, at this point, I'm just wishing that I would have drafted even a crappy tight end who plays all the time. Like I'm wishing that I had, Darren Waller or George Kittle on every single team, because I have some of these teams out there with, Hunter Henry and Cam Braid and Albert. It's like totally useless. One guy I wish I would have bid on after week 1 was Tyler Conklin. I mean, I'm just wishing I had Conklin on all these teams, because you're just rolling him out there for 9 points a week or whatever.
Yeah, it's a train wreck. We'll get to some tight ends later, but yeah, if I could have I've had some, like yourself, I have some teams that I feel good about right now, and I have some teams that need some work. But if I would have just avoided Cole Kmet, my life would have been a lot better right now. It was such a sunken cost. And also he was going in that range where it was like that 9th round on FFPC where there's still some guys that returned upside. I mean, I could have gone Cordero Patterson instead of Cole Kmet multiple times over, Jamal Williams instead of Cole Kmet, and my life would have been a lot better. And we'll definitely touch on some Tyler Conklin. So I ended up with Craig Reynolds and Justice Hill on a lot of teams. I added some Ebner. I know you had some positive things to say about Ebner. Maybe you could kind of share your bullish argument about him and maybe him as a collegiate, your thoughts on him.
Well, he's pretty interesting just in terms of what we would like to bid on in general at running back, especially the way I draft a lot of teams, which is I'm just, it's pure hope at running back too. I got these teams where we got like Michael Carter is starting, like just horrible running back twos. So Ebner in college had 127 receptions. Now he played for a long time and didn't really start until his final season at Baylor. So I think he is already 24 years old, which is, like if he was a wide receiver, I'd be leaving him for dead. But at running back, I don't really care. But yeah, 127 receptions, almost had more receiving yards than rushing yards in college, which I think is a pretty good indicator. So like good skill set. If this guy was on the Buccaneers, I would have been adding him a ton, right? But the Bears, 23 pass completions through 3 weeks. The thing just to add him would basically be like, we see these cluster injuries all the time. We're already down to the, Jordan Mason's getting carries in week 3 for week 3 for the 49ers. So you just never know, right? You literally just never know whose ankle is going to turn next. And Ebner, the only other Bears running back to get a carry this year. But I feel fairly strongly that if they did have to go to him for whatever reason, they would at least let Fields throw him the ball more than they're letting him throw the ball to Cole Kmet.
Yeah, I would agree on that. I think that the bullish argument for Ebner, obviously Khalil Herbert is a top 12 running back right now in such a small sample size, which is just nuts. But I think the bullish argument would be they've never used Khalil Herbert really as a third down back much. I think this is John Daigle made this argument today that maybe we should be a little more bullish on Ebner. But it sure looks like the Khalil Herbert show. But Ebner, I think, is at least interesting. And I would say if you go to the second round of waivers, he's going to be there. He made it through in a couple of leagues. So if you play dynasty leagues on FFPC, he's definitely a guy you want to add just based on the fact that I think a year from now it could be Herbert and Ebner with Montgomery out of Chicago. Tonight's game is a little more exciting than the Chicago Bears, at least for fantasy-wise. We've got the Cincinnati Bengals and the Miami Dolphins. It's a super tilting way to start the week fantasy-wise. You've got Jamar Chase, You got T. Higgins. You got Tyreek Hill. You got Jalen Waddle. Joe Mixon's going to play. Most likely Tua is a starter, and also Joe Burrow's obviously a starter. So you have a lot of skin in the game fantasy wise. One player who I'm interested in how you're approaching moving forward is Chase Edmonds. Last week the narrative was Raheem Mostert's taking over the backfield. Then Edmonds did a whole lot with limited touches, but he was super efficient. How would you be treating him? Are you starting him anywhere? And how do you think people should approach him for this week and maybe moving forward?
Well, if I had any of Chase Edmonds, I would start him. The Mostert thing is true though. It's just Edmonds he scored twice last week, right? So he happened to get the goal line work. And I don't know, I didn't dig in close enough to know if the Dolphins are you get this drive, then you get the next drive, like the Patriots are doing with Damian Harris and Ramondre, or if it's like situational. But 2 weeks in a row, Mostert has played more snaps, gotten more carries, and actually ran more routes than Edmonds this last week. Now, again, also kind of a noisy sample there because somehow they played the fewest snaps of any team on offense. I think the last 3 years, 39 snaps on offense, just like an all-time weird thing. But I'm actually feeling good about Mostert bags and not feeling that good about Chase Edmonds at this stage.
Would you be keeping both on the bench for tonight's game to break ties, or would you try to jam Mostert in there?
It's kind of hard to say because there's this interesting angle with tonight's game where the Dolphins did not get to practice at all. They practiced on Wednesday, but they practiced at the college stadium in Cincinnati. I think they practiced it just feels like a weird week. Like they're all I can't, there's like a good word here for me to use they're just out of rhythm, right? They're in the facilities. They're not sleeping in their beds. They're at a hotel that they weren't planning on staying on because of the hurricane. I do kind of wonder if they just get boat raced tonight. All that being said, just treating this game like the Vegas line says it is. Bengals standard 3.5 points at home. I would start Mostert. I got an interesting scenario, a super flex league that I co-own. CMC popped up on the injury report. CMC and Antonio Gibson have been our starting running backs. We're just going to start Edmonds tonight. And if CMC plays, we're going to play him over Gibson because I just think it's kind of close enough. But that's the only league where I'm starting Edmonds in.
Yeah, it's definitely one to keep an eye on. And that's interesting. You bring up they practiced in Cincinnati Stadium. Some fan, I'm assuming a Bengals fan, was there taking pictures and filming and kept releasing every single play onto Twitter. Usually the security is a little bit better, but that was an interesting one. And it does seem like a big time trap game. If this was a college team, you would be betting the house on them getting smoked tonight against the Bengals, especially coming off that huge win. I think it'll say a lot about Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins' approach, how they come out of this game because it's a short turnaround. They beat the Bills. But how excited are you about Mike McDaniel? It seems like he's really gets it fantasy-wise. He's consolidated his target tree for his top two wide receivers. I think they're at 60% plus. And he's won in different ways. They won in a shootout and they won 2 close ones. What are your takeaways for him? And do you think that Waddle and Hill can maintain this crazy target share?
I do think they can. One, because I don't think they're going to trim back the Tua deep throwing stuff all that much, and I expect him to continue to be good at it. But then also, McDaniel just seems like a very good offensive coordinator. It's like, do I expect the 49ers to not really target a third player at all? Yeah, pretty much. I don't really expect to be adding Danny Gray or Juwan Jennings in any league. Am I going to be starting Ben Skowronek in any league? Same kind of West Coast offensive philosophy. No, it's just going to be Kupp. And I guess at this point, Higbee and not really Allen Robinson. So I expect that to continue. And just in general, I think McDaniel, I was wrong about him. I was kind of skeptical in the same way I'm skeptical about Shanahan, right? Like Shanahan does a lot of things and we love his plays, but then at the end, his teams kind of fold in these big games a lot, kicks a lot, doesn't go for it on 4th down a lot. McDaniel's been the exact opposite. Week 1, 4th and 7, they go for it, get the touchdown to Waddle. I think he does. I think he does really get it.
he seems like kind of like the smartest man in the room, and it's for real. So I'll be interested to see where they end up as a team. We've also seen some really big-time performances from some of these rookie wide receivers again. We have the Drake London, obviously, Chris Olave. Talk to me a little bit about Treylon Burks. Is he the next one to really break out? I know he's got some limitations from the offense he's in, but there's signs that he could be coming very soon.
Well, the interesting thing last week was Kyle Phillips doesn't play. The production was not there from Burks. He had an end around that went for 13 yards and one catch for 16 yards, I believe, in the end. But he played. He ran the most routes on the team. They got him involved in the first quarter. That's like not super mainstream yet. You kind of got to be inside football, but like really watch what a team does, like their first 3 drives, because that's going to be the stuff they practiced all week. That's going to be, they got that scripted out. That's going to be, Vrabel, and I don't even know the name of the Titans offensive coordinator now that it's not Arthur Smith, but like that's going to be the stuff they sat down and they were like, okay, we're going to do this play. And if it's successful, then we're going to do this. If it's not, we're going to run this. Like that is going to tell you what's kind of on the forefront of the mind of the offensive coordinator. And Burks had the end around in the first quarter, and then he had a nice deep target on a 3rd and long that he ended up converting. And then Robert Woods ended up having the big game. But I think that buries the lead, which is Burks is totally ready to join Olave, London, Garrett Wilson with a huge fantasy game. I don't know if it's going to be this week, but it's definitely coming.
Yeah, we're really excited about Burks. I have a ton of Burks in Dynasty and also in redraft. It just feels like he's going to break out on my bench at some point, but I agree with you. It is coming. One guy we saw last week to have his breakout performance was Romeo Doubs. How can we treat him moving forward? Do you think he's like a wide receiver 3 flex play moving forward for you? Do you think there's room for more? How comfortable are you using him in your lineups? I know we'll say NFFC, I imagine, people are starting him. Would you put him in an FFPC lineup this week?
Yes. I mean, I said on TV this week that if I was in a shallow league, I would bid more for Doubs than I would for Jamal Williams and Khalil Herbert. If I'm in a 10-team home league on Yahoo or whatever, I'm bidding on him over them. One, what I was just talking about, the opening drive stuff, Dobbs gets 3 targets, 3 receptions, catches them all, scores a touchdown on the opening drive for the Packers because he was the only wide receiver that was at practice all week. Cobb was sick. Lazard was sick. So those guys didn't practice. And they said, you know what? You're our dude. Like, let's see what you can handle. He did it as good as you could have expected. I mean, the Allen Lazard bag defenders like literally have to be sick watching Dobbs be this good immediately. And to be fair, I didn't really buy it. I don't think I have Dobbs on any main event team, but I do have a lot of Christian Watson because I'm like such a draft position guy. Like just in general, the guy with the higher draft position is going to have the chance to succeed. I think what's going to happen now is Dobbs is just going to be in that. I mean, you don't want to say Devontae Adams role because obviously he's not that good, but the Devontae Adams role where they're moving him across the formation. He's the guy getting the wide receiver screens. That's been such a huge part of this Matt LaFleur Packers offense is the rub routes where he runs underneath. They do those unbalanced formations where they have the 3 wide receivers on one set, and then they have the guy they want to target run underneath. Dobbs ran all of those. Lazard didn't run any of those against the Buccaneers. I would for sure start him if I had him this week.
Yeah, he's a guy that I'm really excited about as well. And I think that once you kind of see it, it's going to be hard to put it away because Green Bay is just so devoid of pass catchers that scare you at all. The chat is lit right now. Shout out to 1912. Shout out to ML. Shout out to Matt Leahy. I'll take a question from Dan Williamson, who's my co-host at Go District and also co-manager on a bunch of teams. What do you think's going on with the San Francisco offense right now? The early returns are not so great.
Jimmy G stinks.
Yeah,
right?
He's horrible, right?
He's not good. The things that Jimmy G does well when those are not available, when they're game planned against, is very like guys not throwing 30 yards down the field outside the hashes. Now, he is really good at throwing over the middle of the field, which a lot of quarterbacks aren't. Like Russell Wilson never throws over the middle of the field. But and also, I mean, it's hard to say how much of it is Shanahan, how much of it is McDaniel, but I mean, Jimmy G does need stuff schemed up for him. And so do the wide receivers. Like Debo and Brandon Ayuk do not win they don't win in the way that like Cortland Sutton or Justin Jefferson does. Like they're different body types, different types of route runners. I mean, I think that they'll probably be fine. The defense is really good. Also, the offensive line stinks. They lost some guys from free agency. They lost some guys to injury. I'm not the right guy to go to be like, oh, well, they need to be doing this. Like, I don't know. I just know their offensive line stinks. And Jimmy seems like a guy who would be sensitive to offensive line quality in terms of his production, but I'm not sweating it for anyone on the team. I mean, because the passing attempts are going to scale enough with Jimmy at quarterback that I think Debo, Kittle, and Ayuk should probably like all be fine, but there are definitely going to be some stinkers in there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, especially with the Rams game this week. Debo has absolutely smashed against the Rams the last few times they played each other. I'll be interested to see that matchup. Another team going through some change at the quarterback position is the Jets. Zach Wilson returns this week. The Jets are right now the most pass-happy team in the NFL percentage-wise. How does Wilson change this offense? How are you looking? I mean, it's impossible to predict it, but what would be your thoughts on what to look for Jets fantasy options? Are you a little bit bullish on Wilson here, or are you really extremely scared?
I'm scared. As a big Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, not so much Corey Davis, Michael Carter drafter. I mean, you got to be scared. I mean, one, it's like Joe Flacco leads the NFL in passing attempts, so are they going to keep doing this with Zach Wilson? Is he going to be able to sustain enough drives? What is going to go on there? Now, you could be cautiously optimistic because like we know Flacco stinks. We know Flacco is not going to make these guys better than they are. We know they're not going to be scoring 27 points a game with Joe Flacco as their quarterback. It's just not going to happen. Wilson could be good, right? And maybe the probability of that is pretty low, and you definitely have to adjust your priors from being the second overall pick to being really, really bad, like worse than Mike White and Josh Johnson last year. But at least in theory, it's hard to see even practice. At least in theory, he could be better, right? He could come in, he could have learned all this stuff over the offseason. Like you can be injured and still improve cerebrally. That was a hard word to say. Theoretically, they could be better. I don't know if they will be. I don't have any opinions on the quality of the offensive line. It seemed to me like one of the problems with Wilson last year was that he just would not take the easy stuff. He just was totally unwilling. We saw the reception scale up for Ty Johnson and Michael Carter when the backup quarterbacks were in there. And if you're playing for a bad team, sometimes you got to just take 4 yards. Sometimes you got to just accept the 4-yard dump off to Breece Hall instead of trying to make a hero throw off your back foot 47 yards down the field to Garrett Wilson.
I'm hoping that we see Elijah Moore. I know that they didn't have a whole lot of success last year playing together, Wilson and Moore, but it seemed like that was the narrative in the offseason was Wilson has a connection with Moore in training camp and mini camp. I'm hoping that we see Elijah Moore take a step up. I'm a little worried about the running backs. You bring up the dump offs. Breece Hall's kind of been living on some of these receptions, and obviously that's part of Michael Carter's game. Would you be apprehensive about using them? I mean, I think they're right now, both of them you could kind of consider RB3s with upside. Would that be your approach to them, or are you a little worried with Wilson?
I would start both of them as running back twos. I mean, again, on most of my teams, Michael Carter's a fine running back too, because I was not drafting, 4th, 5th, 6th round running backs. Probably none of those guys are in my portfolio. I would never have to ask myself Dameon Pierce versus Michael Carter because I just don't have Dameon Pierce, But I mean, both of them have shown enough involvement in terms of running routes, and both of them have gotten usage in the red zone too when they do get there. That you could the issue was in week 2, Ty Johnson randomly showed up and played the 2-minute drill twice. He played it at the end of the first half, and I think he ended up running 13 routes in week 2, which was you cannot have that, right? 2 guys is fine, 3 guys on the Jets, all unstartable, right? And I mean, that's true on any team, right? If the Buccaneers were using 3 guys, we wouldn't want any of them. If the Colts were using 3 guys, we wouldn't really want to start Jonathan Taylor. So as long as it's the 2 of them, it should be fine. You do got to be a little bit worried about Ty Johnson sneaking in there.
Shout out to ML in the chat. Tyler Conklin, he thinks falls off big time with Wilson under center. You brought up some respect for Conklin, people that picked him up. What's your thoughts on Conklin? I know that he's seeing maybe a 15% target share. Do you think that can hold up with Wilson?
You would be a little bit worried, right? It kind of feels like that's like the veteran quarterback thing. He's like the veteran quarterback's fine just chunking it to the tight end 7 yards down the field. I would say probably if things would play out in a way that Zach Wilson has gotten better, probably what I would anticipate is lower passing game usage for Breece and Carter that's made up for by more sustained offensive success, and then lower target numbers for Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson in total, but higher efficiency and probably greater yards would be my guess. Conklin feels like the most obvious loser because, like, also part of it is his target share is not that impressive. I think it's 17%. It's just they've thrown 155 times through 3 games. So scale them back to something like 37 passing attempts per game. And then all of a sudden you're looking at like Zach Conklin's just Hayden Hurst, basically.
Yeah. He's definitely a tilting one. You know, people have really, really enjoyed having those points. I know I was able to add him to a lot of teams. So that's one I'm worried about. So I'm really hopeful for Elijah Moore. I think Garrett Wilson's just too good a player to worry about. He's just a really good wide receiver 3 with upside weeks and spike weeks potential. But that Jets offense it's super interesting now with the quarterback switch. One player who's off to an extremely poor start is DJ Moore. How are you treating him? It's almost crazy to say this, but are you benching DJ Moore this week? Do you want to see it, or are you just leaving him out there and letting it ride?
No, I would bench him if and kind of the converse of like the Michael Carter, Breece Hall question of like, would you bench those guys? Like, I actually would have the option to bench DJ Moore on most of my teams because I have a bunch of Olave and Jahan Dotson and I mean even like Richie James with Sterling Shepard, Wandale, and Tony out versus DJ Moore. I don't know. I might go Richie James. I mean, Richie James, I'll tell you this. If all 3 of those guys don't play, Richie James is getting 5 for 50. Just I'll guarantee you 5 for 50. I can't guarantee you 5 for 50 for DJ Moore. Now, DJ Moore could obviously, get a little, 70-yard touchdown like my guy LaVisca Chenault did last week. Like, I don't think anything. My opinion on DJ Moore's skill set has not changed at all. I think if he played for the Buccaneers, we'd view him the same way we view Chris Godwin, or if he played for the Cowboys, we think he's as good as CeeDee Lamb. It's just he has just been. It's so unfortunate. He's just been crushed. And I wanted to get to this. I was going to say Dobbs, no question. Dobbs, no question in the lineup over DJ Moore.
Okay, I'll give you one: Greg Dortch or DJ Moore.
I mean, if Rondale doesn't play, Dortch for sure. I mean, Dortch, same thing as Richie James. I'll guarantee you 5 for 50 from that guy.
No Hunter Renfrow if he's out. Mac Hollins or DJ Moore.
This one is so tough for me because Mac, he killed me in DFS. I didn't bid on him in any leagues, but it's like, so I will say this. I'm just always going to lose on guys like Mac Hollins. Not a particularly good prospect. Career special teamer, been in the NFL since 2017. Like, that's just a guy I'm going to lose on. Whereas, like, I might win on Christian Watson showing up and being a great prospect in the second half of the season, right? Or so if he gets dropped in some of these main event leagues, I'll be picking him up. But these guys, and this commenter is correct. Like, this actually should theoretically be a spot for DJ Moore. It's like their defense is terrible. They might cause the Panthers to play a little bit faster in terms of pace. I wouldn't be wanting to bench DJ Moore just out of spite, but it's just so hard. Baker's been terrible.
Yeah, it's super ugly. Who's your least favorite NFL coach right now? Is it Matt Rule or is it Nathaniel Hackett?
I think Hackett is worse because at least Hackett, like, there's not an excuse. It's like, look at this offense. You got Russell Wilson, Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. But Rule is more annoying because Rule is ruining the first overall pick and a third round pick by just not running enough plays. I think if the Panthers were running 70 plays a game, I don't actually think we would be that bummed out about DJ Moore and CMC. I actually think it would probably be fine. It's just they're playing so slow and so bad. So it's got to be it's pretty close. That's a coin flip between the two. I don't think I could decide.
I think for me, I have less respect for Nathaniel Hackett for sure, because Matt Rule at least, grinded, won at Temple, won at Baylor. Like he's got a little bit of common sense. I think Hackett just might be maybe the worst coach I've ever seen for fantasy. And now he's working in a third running back for teams, with where I have Javonte Williams. I'm already worried about Melvin Gordon, and now Mike Boone is showing up. So I really dislike both of them. But I think it's a lean to Hackett for me. Another wide receiver that was in fuego in draft season was Gabe Davis. He absolutely, we're standing there in Vegas watching in the FFPC Thursday night tip-off party, and he burns the Rams for a deep touchdown. Everybody is high-fiving. He's looking like the steal, the justified ADP. And now it's kind of a sobering last 2 weeks. He has the injury, and then, last week he was underutilized. He's at an 11% target share. Are you worried at all about Gabe Davis right now? Or do you think this is just treat him as a wide receiver 2? He's going to have huge spike weeks kind of deal. Like, what are you thinking with Gabe?
No worries, man. I mean, it's like, am I worried about Justin Jefferson, who just gave up a touchdown to Adam Thielen and KJ Osborne? No, it's like this is the give and take with wide receivers. Like, yeah, every once in a while, Gabe Davis is what did he get, like 6 points this last week or something? I think he had like 3 for 42 or something. It's like, yeah, every once in a while, you got to eat one of those, and Zeke will never get you worse than that. Zeke will always get you 9, so you always take Zeke or whatever. But it's like, Gabe Davis is also going to end the year with 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns, and you're not always going to be able to predict when it's going to happen. So just start him every single week. I mean, probably the most bullish thing for him is that they have continued to use him as actually their top wide receiver. When you look at the distribution of the plays they play, they take Diggs off the field and bring Gabe Davis in as the run blocker. So you might be saying, well, Davis, why does that matter? It's like he's not getting any points for those. Well, look at the touchdown he scored in week 1. It was because he was that guy. Josh Allen saw something at the line of scrimmage, called the play action play. Gabe Davis walks in the end zone completely unguarded for the touchdown. I think a lot of his production will probably come, not a lot of it, but I bet he probably gets 30 extra points over the course of the season because he is their primary run blocking wide receiver versus Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, he seems like a guy, if you're like in a home league, that would be a great buy low candidate right now. One I would definitely kick the tires for. Another Bill that we saw have a really big game last week was Devin Singletary. Can we trust him as an RB? And with respect to your team makeup, you're definitely starting Devin Singletary. But like breaking ties, do you consider Devin Singletary to be like a top 20 back moving forward, somebody that people should be cramming into lineups, or do you think the weekly usage will be sporadic?
I do think it'll be well. Actually, no. For the time being, it's not going to be sporadic. They've. What more could they show us to say like Devin Singletary is our top running back? The issues with him would be, one, he's still probably not like he still probably scores like 4 touchdowns on the year just because Josh Allen is the battering ram down there. The problem you would be having with Singletary, especially as it pertains to the contest you and I are in, where we just want to win the stupid $1 million, is I'm pretty certain by playoff time, James Cook is going to be a thing, and he definitely got demoted a little bit because of that fumble in week 1. I think we probably would have seen him play a little bit more without that fumble, but I think they had a plan, and the plan was we need to have a more explosive guy playing running back in the playoffs, or at least that's what they thought. And, we got to get this guy up to speed because we know Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, like they're fine, but they're not. James Cook, like in theory, much like the Zach Wilson thing, like in theory, he adds something that they don't have on offense right now.
Yeah, James Cook is one definitely to stash. I think that you could be right on that, but we'll enjoy the Devin Singletary weeks, at least for the next month or so. He looks very, very good. Getting back to the tight end position, it's a mess right now. A lot of the preseason tight ends that people were drafting with fairly a lot of confidence the Albertos, the Cole Kmets. You brought up Hunter Henry, Noah Fant. I mean, guys are just cut now. They're just on the waiver wire. Who are your current top 5 tight ends moving forward? And then maybe we'll dive a little deeper into it.
Okay, top 5 tight ends moving forward. Andrews number 1, Kelsey number 2, Pitts number 3, Waller number 4, Kittle number 5. I think I would just have them. The only thing I would have is I would have Andrews over Kelsey. And that would be my only. And people are probably like, screaming at their TVs right now. Like, how could you have Pitts number 3 still? I actually think Pitts is going to end up being just fine. Now, there's 2 ways to take like the Drake London thing of being like, well, Kyle Pitts will never get there. The whole thesis was that he's going to be the guy. I actually wonder if just having another good player out there helps them sustain more drives. No, I would not take. Well,
Dallas
Josh Stern might be correct.
Yeah.
I think I would take Goddard over Kittle right now. That's a good point because Hurts just looks so freaking good. I mean, he looks like he could make anyone a tight. Like it looks like Jack Stoll could get in there and score a couple fantasy points. So that's actually a good point.
We hope that Jack Stoll doesn't see a whole lot of time, and that was just a hiccup with the he gets over the injury quick because Goddard looks awesome. Before we dive into some other tight ends, we have a question from 1912. What's your take on Evan Engram and Logan Thomas?
I mean, Logan Thomas is down to an 11% target share this year. I know he scored the touchdown, and I know they have a lot of targets available. 11% is not good. This was my case against Logan Thomas the whole time, was that he's such a compiler. Like his good fantasy season, he was playing next to Dax Milne and De'Ami Brown, just not really guys who I thought were going to draw a ton of targets. And I mean, Curtis Samuel has a 23% target share and a 12% rush share. Like that's not going, like they clearly want to use him and they're not changing that until he gets hurt. Ingram, he's like, I actually tweeted like a funny thing about Ingram today. Basically like you create a prospect in a lab and you're like, yeah, Evan Ingram's a great tight end. He had 800 yards and 5 touchdowns as a rookie, outgained DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, and Van Jefferson when they were all teammates in 2016 at Ole Miss. Like he should be really good. He's playing with Trevor Lawrence, who's good. So this is why tight end stinks. It's because like you're doing a victory lap to get 9 points at Evan Ingram.
I know it's really gross. Three tight end, or I'll say 4 tight ends that are not so gross right now. Pat Freiermuth, who had a pretty much a stinker of a game, but then he managed some garbage time catches last week. Gerald Everett, who we've seen have spike game already, looked tremendous against the Chiefs. Tyler Higbee, who I believe is tied for most targets among all tight ends, or he's second. And then David Njoku, who had a smash game last week. Do you feel confident in that group of tight ends? I mean, obviously you have to use them, but should the expectations be managed, or do you think that these 4 can be like solid top 12 tight ends?
I mean, manage your expectations in the sense of like, don't count on 13 from them every week. But if you drafted any of these dudes, like just start them. Like just like, don't sweat it. Matt Lee says he picks up Tunyon. I mean, fine, right? Like Tunyon's out there. He's going to get some red zone targets. Like, I mean, it's just tight end has been such a disaster for me because I drafted a fair bit of Dawson Knox, who looks useless, and Alberto, who is like the most useless player in the FFPC. It's like, he's just a total ghost out there. If I had Pat Freiermuth over Alberto or Dawson Knox on some of my teams, I'd be doing windmills. I'd be so happy and even Njoku too. I mean, I don't care if Njoku does the 1 for 18 disappearing act again next week. Like it's just nice to have him.
Yeah, it's a complete mess. It's funny because I feel like the teams that I'm good at tight end, I have like 2 of them, and then I have other teams where I'm just scraping the waiver wire. You bring up Alberto, and one guy that I'm kind of keeping an eye on is Greg Dulcich. Do you think Dulcich is going to step back into a very nice role in Denver?
I don't want to talk about this. I'm not mentioning it on shows because I know that people I play in leagues with are there, and I did not want to add him this week. Like I just wanted to give it one more week to, take a peek at some other running backs or stuff. But, we're here. I mean, it's time. It's time to spend a couple bucks on Dulcich and drop your Hunter Henrys, your Cam Brates, your Colts tight ends. Like it's time because one, they need something. I mean, the offense looks horrible. KJ Hamler, 0 receptions. Kendall Hinton, 1 reception. Tyree Cleveland, 0 receptions. Like anytime Andrew Beck and Eric Sober and Eric Tomlinson are prominent parts of your offense, you just need a straw to stir the drink. And then the second thing is, I mean, Hackett drafted him. So yeah. Hackett wanted him, not Alberto, right? We would not have been hearing all this Dulcich drumbeat if he came in and was feeling good about Alberto. Like it's a problem.
And mad props for you for reading the entire Denver tight end depth chart, because those guys sound like made up players. They're so bad.
Well, I'm so deep in the Albert O, vortex that I've had to become like intimately familiar with all of these guys.
Yeah, Dulcich is super interesting. He seems like the guy that's like the ultimate stash. He's a former wide receiver, and you bring up the struggles they're having at wide receiver. Even if you take away Jerry Jeudy's long touchdown reception, he's been pretty much a 0 as well. So Dulcich is a super interesting stash for me right now. And one that I think will be starting in these high-stakes formats, I think, down the stretch. Getting to a different one-off position is quarterback, and this is more of a nuanced question. Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen are such a cheat code right now. I think that there's a 5-point tier break between QB3 and QB4. So you're getting almost a touchdown more a game fantasy-wise by just having one of those 3 than QB4. Do you think that this is going to change the market for when we go back to and provided these 3 continue to smash with this tier break, do you think that this is going to change the approach and you'll start seeing people draft quarterback earlier in these high stakes formats, where you might see somebody, to start taking quarterback in the 3rd round just based on the positional advantage? Or do you see this as sort of a one-off season?
No, it's not a one-off season. In fact, I would say it's been drifting this way basically since Lamar's MVP season and then Josh Allen the next year. So this is the stat to really crystallize it. Lamar Jackson has the most fantasy points ever through 3 weeks in the season. No one's ever had more.
He smashed Josh Allen. 2019. It's 2019. You bring that up. It's not even close. If you look,
it's not even close.
Yeah.
Josh Allen, 3rd most fantasy points ever through 3 weeks. Jalen Hurts, 9th most fantasy points ever through 3 weeks. And they're all happening concurrently. So if you don't have those guys, you are just getting owned right now. I mean, if you are, let's say you played it really good and you picked up Mariota, right? You got Mariota and Goff and you're flip-flopping them and you're getting great points. You're averaging 23 points a week with those guys. You're losing by 10 points at quarterback, right? That is huge. I think, so the market really overreacted to 2011, right? You gotta be playing fantasy football a long time to remember 2011. That was the year Eli Manning threw for 5,000 yards. Matt Stafford threw for 5,000 yards. It was a crazy year. And the market way overreacted and all these quarterbacks were pushed way up, right? But this feels way more sustainable because the difference is these guys are not just like hyper efficient. I mean, they're decently. Josh Allen's only averaging 6.9 yards per attempt. The difference is these dudes are just doing everything for their teams. Goal line goes to the quarterback, right? They're throwing. Lamar has a touchdown for every quarter played this year. Like these teams they need them to play basically.
Yeah, it's just nuts what an advantage it is. And then you bring in the fact that there's the spike week potential that they have, where even if your QB4 is doing great, Lamar can put up 45 and just bury you. You can miss at other positions if you just nail one of these type of guys as well. So I'll be very interested to see how the market adjusts. One other big takeaway that I have through the first 3 games is if I told people 2 months ago who the top 12 running backs in scoring would be right now, they'd laugh in my face. James Robinson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Khalil Herbert, Jamal Williams, Antonio Gibson, and Cordero Patterson are all firmly RB1s right now in terms of scoring through 3 weeks. last year we saw Zero RB win the NFFC Primetime and the NFFC Silver Bullet. That was Tommy Libretti.
And the FFPC Best Ball 100K.
And the Best Ball 100K. And then we saw Hero RB, but a true Hero RB where they hammered wide receiver after, I believe, round 1 running back in the FFPC main event. So we've seen sort of a move towards the Hero RB. We've already seen somewhat of a switch towards the wide receiver start. Do you think that people are going to firmly embrace Zero RB a year from now? And how dead is a running back start in high stakes formats?
Well, so in my opinion, running back in managed was already dead. Like, I just would never have considered that. Now, conversely, I still think running back, even after knowing that all these guys stink, I think running back is still probably decent in best ball, just because of how scores are distributed and just needing like 11 points sometimes and how much that's going to impact advance rates. My prediction for next season is that it's Mark Andrews as a first round pick, 2 running backs, I don't know which ones, and then 9 wide receivers are going to go in the first round. That is my prediction. But weirdly enough, I actually think that what we know now is the dead zone for running backs. I actually think we're going to see a fair amount of guys that we kind of like get drafted there. Like, for example, I do wonder if, Travis Etienne, if we actually run him back as a 3rd, 4th round pick again, but with James Robinson, maybe like, I just think there are going to be better quality running backs available there, because I think they're just going to get pushed down. Like, we're going to be drafting like the wide receiver 24 at the 28th pick. Like, it's just there are going to be some insane and almost kind of correctly, almost kind of efficiently, like wide receivers just score more points. It's been absurd up to this point of the season, but I have a feeling that it's gonna be less fun for me personally to draft in these rooms next year.
Yeah, and you bring that up. It's almost a lock right now that in terms of points per game, wide receiver 36 overall is going to outscore running back 24 overall, just in terms of points per game. I think if we look at it in 2 months from now, so I do think it's going to be super interesting. I think it'll affect the way that values are found. You might see some wide receivers kind of get artificially pushed up, which will also be interesting. And I think that the days of finding the Stephon Diggses in the 6th round, the Jamar Chases in the 6th round, I think those days are kind of over. I think that'll be the last super comfortable wide receiver you're drafting will probably be like an early 6th round pick. I mean, you already saw it this year where you would see those rounds where it was like the 4th round and the 5th round were so wide receiver heavy, but I think it'll just be like on steroids next year. And you bring up Andrews, I think he'll be a lock 1st round pick. I think that's.
I actually wonder if he finishes the year with like 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns. I actually wonder if he might go 1st overall in the main event next year.
Well, I think the argument was this summer, and it was an argument that I was leaning into, was if Kyle Pitts has his meteoric rise, then he could be the number 1 pick in main event drafts. I think it was just kind of misread. Andrews is that guy, especially with how efficient Lamar is looking as a passer. And we also think that Mark Andrews, who's put up like in regular PPR, I believe he's had like 25 plus points the last 2 weeks. That first week, he left a lot of meat on the bone. It could be like 25 points for 3 straight weeks. So I agree with you. I think Andrews is an absolute smash right now. We had one trade question in the chat. This was from Griffin Stiegman. Would you trade Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison, Aaron Jones, Gabe Davis? This is a very complicated trade, a 4 for 3. So would you trade the Minnesota backfield?
No, I would not do this.
Yeah, this seems a little complicated.
Because I like Gabe Davis more than Amari. And I think Dalvin versus Kamara. I know Kamara seems like Danny Carter tweeted this weekend. He's like, Kamara is the worst pick in fantasy. And I think it does kind of feel like that right now. That's a spot where I'm like, they'll figure that out. Kamara's too good. they'll figure that out. And then I like Aaron Jones more. Well, no, I like Lenny more than Aaron Jones from this point forward because the Buccaneers are getting their guys back. But I would not do this. I prefer the Dalvin side.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think I would lean that way as well. I have one trade question. Would you trade Marquise Brown and Jalen Warren for Treylon Burks, Devin Singletary, and Devin Duvernay? Basically, the question is, how bullish are you on Hollywood Brown moving forward, especially with DeAndre Hopkins coming back?
I mean, I'm still pretty bullish on Hollywood, honestly. Like I still think he's quite good.
So Burks and Singletary, basically Burks and Singletary for Hollywood Brown.
This is a dynasty league or redraft?
Redraft.
Yeah, I would do that. I love Burks. I would not trade away Burks for like hardly anything. I'd probably have Burks as a top 20 dynasty player. I haven't done rankings in a while. But no, I would want Hollywood. Like I think Hollywood might score 300 PPR points. I mean, he might catch 100 passes.
Yeah, he had 17 targets last week, so it certainly looks like he's set for a smash season. What's your prediction for tonight's game? Who wins?
So this is such an interesting spot because I do not like the Bengals. I want to be short on the Bengals overall relative to like people's expectation for them. But this feels like a horrible spot for the Dolphins. So I'm going Bengals -3. For those of you in legal sports betting states, I have a can't miss like 115-1 same game parlay for you. Bengals to win. Bengals over team total. Jalen Waddle reception over. Tyreek receiving yards over. Jamar Chase +1 touchdown, at least one touchdown. T. Higgins receiving yardage over. Tua pass attempts over. Can't lose.
Definitely tweet that out before the game, Davis, because our people are not going to remember that. And Davis, maybe after that one cashes, maybe send him some money on Venmo. That's a sweet one. Anyway, Davis, thank you so much for coming on. Let people know again where they can find you.
Just follow me on Twitter at Davis Mattek, Mattek. If you guys go to sportsgrid.com or if you have a smart TV, you can watch me on TV from 10 to 11 Central Time every week, Fantasy Sports Today. Subscribe to the Tailgate and the SportsGrid Fantasy Football Podcast.
Awesome. And then join us again in the GOAT District tonight. We'll be back at 7:15 for a GOAT District Thursday night tailgate. The overhead sleeper Dan Williamson will be here. JD will be here. And we're going to be joined by Zachary Krueger, who's been on the show a number of times. RotoViz, NBC Sports Edge, really sharp guy, and always a really fun guest. Thanks again, Davis, and everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, bud.
Anytime.